Okay, this is a big day. It's a nervous day. A day that's been a long time in the making. Probably at least a couple of years. Isn't that right, honey?
Yep.
Yeah. Somebody's been harassing me to actually get off my butt and get going on this. So here we are. We are going to have a real first foray into cheese. Now, my wife and I have done some fresh cheeses over the years, but it's been quite a while. But we're going to dive headfirst into Brie today. Now, this is the first time that we've done this. I'm certainly not going to treat this as any sort of a tutorial, but rather come along for the journey and let's see how it turns out. Now I have my tools here all sanitized. I had these in my cheese pot, actually steaming away boiling water, which was also sanitizing the pot itself. Then I actually also gave everything a spray down with some 70% isopropyl alcohol. I also sanitized the bins and the racks themselves here with a diluted bleach solution, and everything's just drying off here. For actually heating the milk and making the cheese here, I'm going to be using my precision cooker and the hot water bath method here. I know there are a lot of different ways to do that, but since I've got the tools here, I'm going to use this. I think it'll be a really good way to just gently warm the water and therefore the milk and keep everything at a good temperature. We're just going to dive in right now, and we'll start off by adding 3 gallons of 3.5% milk fat whole milk here to my cheese pot. We're just using some local milk here. This is some organic 3.5% whole milk. Notice that it's non-homogenized. That's a big deal here. That way we won't have to be adding calcium chloride to it because that process hasn't messed up the fat globulins inside of this. Now, my wife is Portuguese, and when she was young, she would make cheese, fresh cheese in Portugal and all kinds of cheeses. And there, the milk that they used, they could just use any of the milk from the grocery store. However, over here in North America, typically we need to buy special milk, which unfortunately costs a little bit more, but results in much better cheese. And we're also going to be adding 3/4 of a cup of this heavy cream here. We're going with a 36% organic whipping cream, again, non-homogenized. And that'll just raise our fat content for this a little bit. I've got my precision cooker set at 102 degrees. I did have this hotter than that, obviously, initially, and that was just because our tap water here is quite warm, but I knew that I was adding some fairly cold milk to this, so that's totally fine. Now, I've got my ThermoPro thermometer in here, again, all sanitized, and I've got it set with an alarm of 90 degrees Fahrenheit because that's the temperature that we're looking to hit. All right, so we have hit our 90 degrees Fahrenheit, and I gave this a stir. I know that we are up at temperature, so it's time to start adding our cultures. First off, I'm starting off with, this is Choose It, it's the MA4001 culture, and I'm going to go with a pinch and a half of that. Sprinkle that across the top. Then we have our thermophilic type B bacteria, and we're going to go with a heaping 1/8 teaspoon. Then we have our Penicillium candidum mold, and again, heaping 1/8 teaspoon. And then our Geotrichum candidum mold powder, again, a heaping 1/8 teaspoon. And now we're going to cover this up and let them rehydrate for about 5 minutes. After that 5-minute rehydration, we're going to use this wire whisk here. We're doing this in sort of a up and down, kind of scooping motion here just to help ensure that we get that bacteria all the way throughout, side to side and top to bottom. I've let this milk warm up a bit more here. I want it up in the 96 to 98 Fahrenheit range. What I'm going to do now that I've hit 96, you can see I have my precision cooker set at 97, so that's going to keep the water bath right in the range that I want it there. So now I'm going to pop up my thermometer, and I'm just going to let this sit here for 90 minutes. After 90 minutes, we're ready to add our rennet. So I've got some liquid rennet here, and I've got some previously boiled distilled water that we've let cool down here. I'm going to be adding 3/8 of a teaspoon to that. And with that rennet diluted in this water here, I'm going to add it to our milk. And again, just gently whisk it in to mix it into solution. Then we're going to cover it back up and let it sit. So 30 minutes later, we're going to test here and see if we've got a clean break yet. Looks like it's not quite ready. We're going to give it another 15 minutes and then check again. So after that 15 minutes, it looks like we now have a clean break on here. Now it's time to cut these curds. I'm going to be using this sweet stainless curd cutter. Big shout out to my buddy Rob for making this here for me. Now for this, I want to cut these into 3/4 inch or 2 centimeter cuts. So I'm just going to insert here. I'm going to go down 2 lines. 2 more. Definitely feeling some resistance in there. That's great. It's awesome having these demarcation lines on here. It's making it really easy to get fairly accurate measurements. And then one right along the bottom there. And back up. And now we are ready for our vertical cuts. So I'm going to try to also do that in 3/4 inch or 2 centimeter cuts. First running this way, straight down. Trying to be really gentle since I am using an actual knife for this. It's currently the best tool that I've got for it. Now I need to turn that 90 degrees and repeat. And our curds are cut. Now I'm just going to cover this back up and let it rest for 5 minutes. So now I've just popped my cheese pot out of my hot water bath there, and I'm going to just try to gently stir them here using this plastic spoon that I also sanitized here, as I'm hoping it will be a little bit more gentle on the curds. Now I stirred these curds gently like that, as gently as I could, in order to try to just break them up a little bit more and release a little bit more of this whey. I did that 3 times, 5 minutes between each, and then I let them rest for 5 minutes. And now with a sanitized ladle here, I'm just going to ladle off this excess whey until we get down to the curds. Now I'm ready to ladle my curd into my molds here. So I'm just going to use this sanitized ladle here with the holes in it. Try to gently remove them. Now I've got 4 of these molds, relatively evenly filled. I've got those on top of racks here just to allow some draining. I'm going to get these covered up with their lids and let them sit. All right, after 1 hour of these draining, it is time to flip them. So our plan here is to take these small circles I cut out of a larger draining mat, and we're just going to get it down fairly close to the curd, and flip it like so. And I'm actually just going to now set it down on top of that draining mat, and then the walls here will still be able to help hold the shape. I'm going to repeat here with the rest. That actually worked insanely well. And we'll let these continue to drain. All right, so setting those cheeses underneath those molds turned out to be a mistake. When I went to go flip it the second time there, because the top is wider than the bottom, we had quite the struggle getting them in, and it kind of messed up the cheese just a little bit around the edges, but I think we're going to be fine after another flip. So that was just over an hour ago. I'm going to do my best here to get these flipped over. I am still going to use these just to get them out initially. Now I'm just going to get this up into my hand here, and we're just going to whoop, get it right down into that mold. All right, sweet. I'll repeat with the rest. And 1 hour later, we are ready here for the final flip. Just gonna pop that out and right into those molds there. I'm just gonna repeat with the rest. After 8 hours sitting at room temperature with the lids on, but just slightly ajar to allow for some ventilation, we're ready to finally unmold our cheese. Before I do that, I'm simply going to remove these, set them aside into a sanitized tub here. But first, I'm just going to quickly drain off any extra whey. I'm going to put my stainless racks back into my ripening box here. On top of those racks, I'm going to put one of the plastic mats. And I'm going to salt my cheese here, just using some kosher salt. Just giving it a nice, generous sprinkle here of the salt. I'm going to add just a little bit around the edges, and then flip it onto the mat. Salt the top, and then I'm going to repeat that with the other 3 cheeses. Now we'll head downstairs to the ripening fridge. Here we are in the ripening fridge. I've got those lids slightly askew, once again, just to allow for a little ventilation. And I've got this fridge set at 54 degrees Fahrenheit. using this Inkbird temperature controller here. And now we're just going to let it go through the blooming phase. We are currently 8 days in since I put everything in that cheese cave. And here we are. We definitely have mold growth happening all the way around. Even where I touch here, you can see that it's sort of depressing. So it's that white powdery mold that's on here. I've just been flipping them every day or two. You can see on this one here, we don't have quite as much of that mold that's coming up here, but this is sort of more of a creamier color. That's just the actual cheese itself. So I'm just going to keep flipping these here, keeping everything nice and sanitary. Just yesterday, I also drained out some of the whey. There was just a little skiff in the bottom of both of these buckets here. Not a whole ton. Most of that did in fact come off during our initial draining, which is perfect. I'm just going to get these back into the fridge. So after another 2 days, here we are. We have mold all the way around. You can see, actually just touching it here, how it is pressing down. And I actually do sort of want to pat that down just all the way around here. I sanitize my gloves here just before handling the cheese. And we're ready to wrap. So I have some actual soft cheese wrapping paper here. I'm just going to put this down and I can now attempt to wrap my very first cheese ever here. So we just have that centered. I'm going to come up and across. This is probably a slightly larger paper than I actually need, but it should do the trick here. Just trying to get as tightly to the wheel as I can coming around. Now we just need to secure this. I'm just going to use some clear plastic tape here. And I also have a little label here just saying what our product is and the date that we're putting it in here. Now I have my ripening boxes here. These are slightly shorter than the boxes that I can fit my molds into, but they are airtight. I've got these prepped up here. I also gave them a spritz with isopropyl alcohol. I also cleaned up my racks and drying mats, also sprayed them down. I also have here just some paper towel. These reach just sort of like single sheet paper towels that I folded up into little rectangles there and soaked with some distilled water just to provide some additional humidity for here. And now I've got my wheels all nicely labeled up here. I'm gonna set them like this for now. I'm just going to pop them into these boxes here. We'll get the lids on and take them back over to the fridge. And we are now back in the fridge here. I also have a temperature and humidity monitor inside this one box here just so I can track exactly how that's going on in here. I'm hoping that these paper towels that are wet will be able to give me a nice high humidity here while we are ripening. I might have to keep playing around with that and adding water to them as they go. I've also set the temperature controller for this fridge down to 38 degrees Fahrenheit, and now we wait. All right, so it has been 5 weeks and 1 day since this went into those bins. From what I understand, 5 weeks is probably about the minimum amount of time that we could leave this in there before checking it. The 1 day that I went extra is just to prove to myself that I'm a patient human being. So let's take a look at what we got here. I should also note that I'm wearing what I will probably consider my fancy and cozy cheese eating wintertime sweater from now on. Opening it up here. Well, we definitely have that rind going on. This is looking like some pretty sweet brie. Yes! Okay, let's cut into it. I think what we're going to do here is just cut out a little wedge to see what we are working with. Hey, I think we got brie cheese. Look at that. Woohoo! Oh. That is definitely creamy, rich, delicious. My goodness, what do you guys think?
Amazing. Perfect.
I'm like surrounded by people here right now that have already devoured a quarter of this thing. Just slicing it up for everybody. Phenomenal. I have to say I'm incredibly impressed with this. Just tasting this cheese here, it's got some earthiness, some nuttiness. It's got that nice sort of pungent and slightly firm rind on the outside. And then it's just silky and creamy, melty on the interior of this cheese. I was really, really nervous at the outside of this. In fact, I just put it off for probably a couple years because I was afraid I was going to mess it up. However, this has been a raging success. I mean, is this delicious? Yes. Is it the best Brie cheese I've ever eaten? Yes. Is that completely biased by the fact that I made it and it turned out good? 100%. But either way, this means that we have to dig deeper. We have to go further, and I'm going to be making a whole bunch of this here in the near future. This is all that's left of that meal there. Glad that I made 4 of them, but time to get cracking on some more batches. Well, I'm not quite sure what my eventual and final Brie recipe may be like. I'll probably keep tweaking things for a while. I like to play around and experiment with that. But if nothing else, hopefully this serves as a little bit of encouragement in showing that it is certainly possible to make Brie cheese at home, even on your first try with great success. So there you have it. And until next time, keep your cheese at 11.